October 15th, 2022. I want to basically focus here on the fact that the January 6th committee in its last meeting has made the decision to subpoena former President Donald Trump to testify about the events around the January 6th riot, or what you want to call it. And so that's kind of going to be an interesting development to how that plays out. True to form, he immediately responded to the fact that he would be apparently willing to testify. In addition to saying a variety of other things about the illegitimacy of the committee and so forth. So we'll get into that. I do want to mention something else before I go into detail about that. That based on my previous video, about the situation with respect to Ukraine and Russia, that I just saw an article that, of all things, in the Daily Beast, but which relates to a rumor basically that's out, that, or a leak I should call it, that Russia is planning an offensive next year, presumably early next year in the winter months, I assume, when it would work a lot better. And so I just thought that kind of confirms what Colonel McGregor was saying. And even though, like I said, at any rate, I've learned more about him. He's more of a distinguished figure than I realized. So kind of interesting. But let's get on to the big issue about Trump and the committee. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, and subscriptions are appreciated. You can click the bell for notifications if you're a subscriber. Yeah, I think this is an interesting development. Of course, I think it's natural that Trump is always going to take the position initially that he's not going to back down. He does not ever want to look like he's backing down, right? So I'm still questioning, will he really want to testify on this thing? But, and I think a clear sign coming up will be obviously legal action. Does he go to court to try to block a subpoena once it's issued? Does he try to avoid being served even, potentially, I guess? But the point is, and there are two grounds he might try. One would be executive privilege, which is kind of traditional. And the other would be a, what you'd call it, separation of powers argument. And given the way the courts have been treating him lately, I'm not sure it has a lot of chance. But it could have a delaying effect. I'd sort of like to keep this event, however it turns out, to be after the election, which is a little over 3 weeks away from now. And so it would be kind of nice to have that behind us before anything like this occurs. So let's look at what might be involved. I mean, if he were to actually testify, and remember the background of this, there's been all sorts of sworn testimony from all the people around him. Staffers, the White House counsel, campaign staffers, his family members. And so all of whom have basically sort of pretty much indicated, the former attorney general as well, all of whom have testified basically that they told him that the election was lost and that basically he needed to concede. And obviously he disagreed with that, as we well know. And so if he actually puts himself before the committee, swears an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, he could, one thing he could do, he could deny that they ever said that to him. However, that would be setting himself up for a clear perjury prosecution, right? And since the testimony presumably will be given in D.C., it would be in the D.C. Court system with a D.C. jury and a D.C. guilty verdict. So I don't think he wants to do that. The other thing he could do would be, of course, to take the fifth. I mean, after all, that's, what other people have done, General Flynn, for example. And so that would be certainly a way to do, but would he really want to be seen in an interview that would go on for a lengthy period of time where one question after another, accusatory question being asked, and him stating that he's taking the fifth, or however you want to state it? Because remember, the procedures on the fifth to avoid contempt, and I don't understand why it's this way, but it is, that you can't selectively answer questions when taking the fifth. You have to pretty much do it straight down the line. So I guess he could do a mixed bag where he would try to claim that this or that was executive privilege. And certainly one of his attorneys did that in the questioning, who answered questions pretty freely, but occasionally would suggest that the privilege applied in that case, which is different than taking the fifth. So that'll be interesting to see. The other idea would be, of course, to talk around it. I mean, you could just talk around it, right? In other words, avoid saying anything that's specifically untrue, but basically your campaign manager looked at all the information and saw no evidence that you could prove a case of fraud, and then he'd respond something to the effect that maybe they'd lost faith in him, or that he didn't believe they were accurate. As long as he's saying he doesn't believe, or he lost faith, or it wasn't his opinion, and doesn't deny the objective facts that they said it, then it's not perjury, right? Now, look, how that would come off, I don't know. It would sound like that you'd be dealing with a person who would be and knowing him, it'd be a pretty confrontational meeting. So it'd be sort of interesting to see what would happen. But the idea does seem very interesting that this could occur. I sort of think it's not going to occur, but we'll see. I guess we can delay it until after the election and after, well, into the next Congress. Then this committee would go away, and I presume if assuming Republicans were to win the House, which seems probable at this point, at least with some amount, they will disband this whole thing. But they might try to force it to occur before then. So we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, I just thought I'd kind of go through that. It's an interesting topic, I thought. And like I said, on some other issues on the election itself, well, the latest numbers, the latest Rasmussen poll came out with the Republicans up 7 points ahead of the Democrats, which is they've kind of returned true to form. They were up 4 points in the last one. So, and looking at the Real Clear Politics average, I think is something like, was it 7/10 or something like that. However, there's still 3 registered voter polls in there, which also a couple of I don't really trust that much anyhow. So throwing registered voter polls out and only doing the 7 likely voter polls, you come out with an average of 1.7% advantage for Republicans, which either way, it looks favorable for the Republicans to potentially take the House. The Senate, again, remains a very tight competition. And in fact, there's recently been very quick recent time, I think maybe even today, I think at least on one of them was definitely today. The other one I think was, but is that Wisconsin and of course Georgia had their debates. So we'll have to see what impact those debates would have on the polls. But right now it looks like that Johnson's ahead in Wisconsin, and Walker is behind in Georgia, but not by that much. So far, I think, although he's been hurt a little bit by the accusations of the former girlfriend, it looks like he's hanging in there fairly good. So he's doing better than I expected in my video I did on that, although it has hurt him by a couple of points. So we'll have to see how that pans out in the days ahead. But so that's kind of the kind of status of the election. It looks basically favorable, at least certainly on the House side. The Senate side much more competitive. There's always a possibility that with that generic ballot trend continues and carries over the Senate, it's quite possible that some of the more marginal races might move to our column. I mean, if a red wave does start to develop, like was originally expected, and which seemed to kind of go away in the summer, but it looks like Republicans are gaining right now, and with the latest inflation number of 8.2% year over year, and the core rate at 6.6%, with the stock market plummeting, it looks to me, and gas prices now beginning to go back up again, it looks to me like that the conditions are set for a fairly favorable election for Republicans as we go into the period where early voting will be already starting in some places and will be starting in others very shortly. So at any rate, that's kind of the political outlook for the moment. We'll continue to follow that, and so we'll just continue to track what's happening. I will, by the way, I'll be posting this also on Rumble as usual, and we'll, of course, the addresses of my social media accounts are below. And I guess the other development, I want to mention this before I close. I was going to mention that it looks like that the government's launched some kind of a SEC investigation into Elon Musk associated with the purchase of Twitter, which is kind of interesting. We're very close, I guess, to what the court hearing is about ready to begin on that as well. And Elon seems to be positioned willing to actually go through with the deal now. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. We can only hope that he does get Twitter. So at any rate, I'll wrap this up for now, and until next time.